of right out of the gate that I wasn't going to hold back. I was pretty much going to just put it all out there. I don't get a chance to do that often. Usually if I'm speaking anywhere, what I kind of end up doing is doing either something corporate or kind of along these lines, or end up at colleges or high schools talking about career paths and things like that, because I'm sure by looking at me, you guys assume that I probably have done a few different things and probably don't look like I fit where I'm actually at now, which is totally true. Nothing about my life has been normal. I grew up in this town, and really, I hold true to the philosophy as it states up there. It's not where you're from, it's what you become. I mean, that's huge to me. The reason that it is comes down to just really, honestly, a couple of things. It comes down to the fact that growing up in a small town, you feel like there's not a lot here. There's not a ton of opportunity. You go to big cities, there's everything everywhere. But here, you know, you can see from one end of the town to the other. There's no colleges. You don't see opportunity in front of you. And that's tough. But, you know, thank you very much. But what's crazy is that I'm already dry-mouthed. But in all seriousness, what it came down to for me is I had a lot of hopes and dreams, and everybody kind of told me in the beginning it wasn't feasible. I mean, what kid tells everybody that he wants to get paid to be himself? I mean, that's what I wanted my job to be myself. Funny thing is, that actually happened. And how it happened, I'm honestly not sure. The only thing I can tell you is that this weird road that we all kind of get on, because we think it's here to there. You know, you're in school now, you probably have college in front of you, you're talking about all these future choices. I had all those too. I was ready to make those decisions. And the last minute, I changed my mind. And that's really how I've lived since. And I'm going to cover a lot of that with you guys just simply because I know exactly where you're at. And believe it or not, the adults in this room also know where you're at. As much as maybe it doesn't come across like that, it doesn't translate to you guys that way, maybe they're not open enough. Maybe they're not willing to just throw it out there for you. I am. And in that, if anyone throughout this has questions, I don't care if we get stuck on slide 2 and that's where we end up for the night. I'll come back if we have to. Or I won't if you guys are totally tired of me talking already. But in all seriousness, I want to make sure that you guys get out of it what you want. This isn't about me. You know, people always assume that speakers are put on a stage somewhere because they have the answers, because they know things. Truth of the matter is, I've failed a lot of stuff. I mean, a lot of stuff. I'm going to tell you about it. It's going to be probably pretty interesting. But what I've learned through those failures was the knowledge to get me where I am. Am I perfect? No way. The kids sitting here will tell you that I'm not. My wife will tell you that I'm not. But it's okay for me to screw up. Because whatever I screw up tonight, talking to you guys, next time you see me do this, if there's a second time, that won't happen again. Because that's part of making mistakes. That's why that matters. And to give you a little insight, looking north to me was something, actually it's a book title, it's something I created like 5 years ago because I was a mess. And I didn't know where to look anymore. I couldn't look down because, I mean, all you see is bricks and gravel in your shoes. That's no fun. And it was time for me to make a life choice. And north was the only place I hadn't looked. I lied to myself. I said I wouldn't do that. And I did it. And I'm only 32. I lied to myself, essentially, until I was 30-ish. And I still struggle. I still fight it. There's people in here I know follow me on Facebook and Twitter and all the Instagram-y things and everything else. And if you do, and if you don't, please do jump on, friend me, say hey, whatever. But you'll see that almost every morning I post something positive. That's as much for me as it is for you guys. People are like, thank you, that's so great. You know what? I need that. Every day I need that. If it's on there, I'm struggling that day. It's not easy to take one foot in front of another when you've seen certain things, when you've been a part of certain things, when you've chosen certain pathways. And again, if you look at me, I have essentially made my life harder in some ways. And we'll talk more about that again. You guys can ask questions all you want about anything. I'm a totally open book. Adults too, by the way, whatever you want, ask, please. But again, thanks everybody for the invitation to be here. It's truly an honor. The place is beautiful. And to be able to do it in my hometown, seriously, made me nervous for the first time in years. So I'm going to go ahead and have you flip to the next slide for me quick. If you look at this, I mean, home. You know, we all have a place that's supposed to be our protector, kind of our bubble that we live in that feels good. Raise your hands, guys, seriously. How many of these people's home lives look similar to this? Anyone? Put them up? I mean, it's okay, seriously. It's a big deal to put them up because everybody feels completely alone in things like this, which is why the last word up there says isolation. I know I did. And this is exactly the path that my life took. And anyone who had your hands up for about the 3 seconds you had them up, feel free to put them up again. Mine, again, is up, and I'm up here telling you about it. The reason is because everyone who had them up isn't alone. You have me understanding what you went through, because I know how silly that might be. The great thing is, if you looked around quick enough, you saw at least 3 or 4 other kids who also are dealing, were dealing, continue to deal with. Again, I'm in my 30s. I, for the first time last year, feel like I kind of sealed up what pieces of this are. I mean, that's been like, I was 12 years old when my parents got a divorce. You know, I remember, you know, this tiny seed is planted, out you come, everything's great. You know, you have your bikes and Legos and all these fun things, and then something comes along to kind of take that away. You know, you're used to mom and dad and brother, sister, the routine, the things that happen every night, the, you know, home from work, supper time, all those great things you're used to. See you later. They're gone. And what are you stuck with? I mean, how does that feel? Who do you look to? Who do you guys blame? I blame myself. And the funny thing is, I didn't blame myself until about 6 years later. I didn't realize until I was 18 how much my parents' divorce affected me. I retreated. I kept to myself to the point that I wouldn't even leave my bedroom. Can we go next slide, please? And again, this is the next step in that. What's your childhood made of? Some of you are still in pieces of that. Your teenage years, your upper, your tweens, as they're called. And this is exactly how I feel. Anybody feel that now? Anybody willing to admit that right now, that that's how you feel? See, these two gentlemen, both adults, both willing to admit it. I mean, seriously, if you feel that way, raise them up. It matters because, again, you can look to one another to do that. If you're not willing to admit it out loud, no one can help you. And no one can look to you for advice because whatever you guys have been through, someone else has also been through, or a form of it. Maybe they're farther along than you. Maybe they have some answers that you don't have. And if you don't know who has those answers, where do you go? You stay isolated. Stay alone. You look for an escape. And honestly, for me, I mean, heck, I'm still different. I don't look like I fit in these clothes. When I go to work, I don't fit in that atmosphere. I mean, I talk to hunters and presidents of big corporations, and I look like this. That's something that in school people said, well, if you do these things, that's not possible. True, to a point. There are ways around that, and we'll talk about that. And the reason that that's even important to acknowledge is because, number one, I made this choice. Those choices I didn't make. Those are the choices I wrestle with. Those are the ones that still hurt. And they do. That escape for me was a basement bedroom It was music. It was books. It was moments when I would have my father, who was an amazing dad, tried his best. When he would take me to shows, concerts that kids your age would kill to go to because no parents would take them. My dad would take them just for time. But where would I be after school or between school and work? Those minuscule hours when I was at home, I would be in my dark basement bedroom with my lamp on next to the bed, reading a book, trying to escape the misery that really wasn't even necessarily in the household. That because of the feeling different, the feeling alone that I had up here, I isolated myself completely. And the pressure that I felt because of that was so intense. And I didn't just feel it at home. I felt it at school. I felt it at work. I felt it all the way until I was in my late 20s. And I mean, really, you think about how many years that is. That's more than a decade that you're dealing with that. And I mean, to you guys, when you can look back and say, wow, that was 20 years ago, that's when you realize, holy cow, I'm kind of getting old because I can say that, number one. And number two, when you realize that for that many years, at that point, more than half of my life, I felt like I was suffering. And that's a tough pill to swallow. And at some point, you do have to kind of assess the situation and decide to make a change. Can I have you switch to the next one, please? Now, see, this is heavy. This is also true. And what I mean by death, obviously I'm standing here. I'm real. I'm not some ghost, But in all seriousness, there's a lot of darkness. There's a lot of depression. There are places that leads. And I don't know where you guys are at, but in life, I mean, we're talking high school, junior high age. There's pressure for drinking. There's pressure for drugs. There's pressure for sex. There's pressure to do all sorts of crazy things that you may or may not want to do, think is okay to do, feel comfortable with or not. Everybody's kind of got to learn. And I'll tell you, that pressure, if you don't know how to deal with it, can take you down some dark roads. I was already there. I had no idea what was next. And by this time, I'd already graduated. I was out of school. I'd already been through all that. I thought there was some light at the end of the tunnel when I graduated. And it's funny because really for me, at this point, right about here, I was reaching the goals that I actually had set for myself. And, I was right where it says depression, suicide, and the end. I was actually right at that time on national television. And as far as I know, I'm one of the only people to ever bring a national TV crew to our tiny little town of Brooklyn. And you know what? It's funny because I was hurting more at that time than I probably ever was in my life. And what's funny about it is I was living alone, and I had a girlfriend. I had a job that paid well beyond any non-college educational driven job that I could ever have thought I'd get. It was a good job. I had also just started working in a tattoo studio, and that was a dream since I was like this high. Seriously, first grade, I'm like, I'm going to be covered in tattoos. Okay or not, it's what I want. And everybody thought I was crazy. It happened, obviously. And, at that point, I was just traveling those roads. And that was a really big deal for me. And then this group of guys in a band that I looked up to since I was also this big, I now had chances to meet, to be on TV shows with them, to have some of their musical equipment. I mean, all these things, Lady Gaga's and all these people right now, those are such a big deal. Can you imagine if you had like her stage clothes and her instruments and her microphones and all that stuff sitting in your house? I did, and I got to be on TV for it. Pretty cool. Something I always wanted. Didn't care. I was excited for a little while, and now to look back, it's hilarious because I'm some, skinny 19-year-old kid, and to rewatch those is funny. That's the best part of that. But the memories still ache. And really what it comes down to when it says suicide up there, I put out a few books and stuff a few years ago. And in 2007, I put out a book called Through the Eyes of an Abstract Mind. Inside that book contains the note that I wrote the day that I was ready to let it go, to forget about this world. And it's kind of crazy because the way I look at it, and the reason it says the end is simply because that day was it. I'd never in my life set a goal that I didn't reach until that day. And I wrote it, was ready to let go, and I told myself when I got up that evening, because I worked nights at the time, that would be it. Note sat on my table in my tiny little kitchen apartment, and I remember going to sleep thinking this is the last time I'll ever do that. And I got up and my feet hit the floor that day. And at that moment, I realized something. I was already dead. I'd already committed to this. What happens now? Do I have to go through this act, this selfish, horrible act that my family, everybody I knew would have to deal with? Or do I just decide right now, every single thing that makes me unhappy can go away? And that's what I did. Called my girlfriend of several years that day, and I told her, look, there's some things I'm not happy with. I can't do it. I called this job that was so great that I made a lot of money at right out of high school and said, I'm sorry, I'm not coming in ever again. And I called my boss at the tattoo studio. I said, look, I'm not coming in, and I don't know when I'll be back. I need time to figure things out. And that was it. That was the end of that life. And figuratively speaking, that person was gone. And as funny as that sounds, that was the first turning point in my life. It's like 19, 20 years old-ish, give or take. And you think you suffer for so long, you don't realize that you start to deal with these demons, or don't deal with these demons, until it just hits all at once. And that's where I was at. I wanted to, if you go to the next slide, I wanted to put this in there. Because you know what, let's be honest, all this talk about depression and crazy anxieties and stuff, seriously, cats. Because sometimes things do get pretty serious. I mean, come on. And if you guys get a chance to talk to me, I'm not some super intense, serious guy all the time. But I want you guys to really understand where I'm coming from. But and my kids are down here talking because they certainly understand what this is to my life and how much cats matter. But anyway, I'll be kicking over to the next slide here. Okay, so I'm already changing my life. Everything's good, right? You can just be completely covered in tattoos, scared to death of everything, and not even know where you're going. Now you have no money. You have no life companion, which you thought you had. You just pushed off of one of the guys in your life that was giving you one of your dreams. Then what? Then zero. I was nothing at that point. I could do anything in the world I wanted. Anything. What do you do? At that point, I'm like, awesome. This is like, I can do anything. I can travel. I can see the world. I can change everything. I can take as much risk as I want because I was already dead. I was already gone. So what? And the funny thing is, when I started to shed that skin, I started to realize that because I could do whatever I wanted, I realized kind of how restricted I was. And I'm going to tell you guys a quick story. And it's one of my favorite stories, and I've told it a lot, but never kind of in this context. it was always one-to-one. So to tell it to a bunch of people, especially based on what I'm going to tell you, it's pretty interesting. Because I don't know if you guys know what agoraphobia is at all. Does anybody? Danny knows. Sean knows. I mean, really, what agoraphobia is when you can't be in a place like this because there's people and it's open spaces. And you know what's crazy about that? Is I couldn't leave my apartment after work. I would come home, I would go to sleep, I would wake up 4, 5-ish, right? And at this point, I told you, you know, the dreams of being tattooed and stuff painted me right in a corner that my parents told me would happen. And it's funny because I grew up in a small town, and at that time, you didn't see people who had tattoos everywhere. I mean, and I did, and I do, obviously. And people would stare at me everywhere I go. People still stare at me everywhere I go. First thing that I was asked tonight, or told tonight, wow, I like your ears. You know? I mean, I can't take I could take these off, I suppose, but I mean, these are huge. I can put pop cans in them. At that point in my life, how do you accept that? You're 20 years old, and you go to get toilet paper at the grocery store, and old people are like, shh. Kids are like, and they still are. They still are. And the difference is how I look at it. You know, people that I grew up with now are like arm's length or farther because they didn't get it. They didn't understand. We fear things we don't get. And the scary thing really about that, no one bothered to ask. But I sure didn't bother to tell them either. Because what was I doing if I needed milk or I needed toilet paper? I was figuring out exactly how much it cost. And I was sitting on my couch, fully dressed, boots on and laced, staring at the doorknob because it was my worst enemy. Because I could not walk across the room and turn that knob, open the door, traverse the steps down, out the door, walk across the highway, walk to the back of the grocery store, and get my milk, turn around, say hello to the nice cashier, hand them money, and walk back. I could not do that. You guys do that stuff every day. You get out of bed, you get dressed, you go to school. As much as you hate it, you do it. Imagine if you could not do it. If this told you no, and then screamed no when you wanted to do it. Anybody have any idea what that kind of thing is? Danny knows. Carla knows. It's insane to think that you can't go get milk for your cereal that you're eating at 6 o'clock at night because that's when you got up. So instead you eat your cornflakes dry. Do you know how horrible that is? And how often that I did it? Because I was scared. I mean, you know, mix a few tears in there because I'm bawling, because I'm so pathetic I can't leave. This afforded me that difference. And it's funny because that next day, I walked down the stairs, I went over, I got some soda and everything else I needed. And the only time it really dawned on me what I was doing is when I paid them and realized, I don't know if I have another 20 bucks and I don't have a job to get 20 bucks more. That's the only time it started to register to me. And again, you know, it comes down to the fact that I had just shed all of this skin to become something new. I just did something the day before I couldn't do because a choice that I made, a choice. It is that simple. I mean, think about it. If there's any fear you have, you can make a choice to change it. Sounds easy. It is easy, but you have to be ready up here. And it takes people to get there. I still wasn't ready. Thought I was ready. Still wasn't ready. But I made plans. And I had dreams. I'd already reached these silly kind of kid dreams that I had. But I also remembered being really little and my parents telling me that I could do whatever I wanted in my life. Remember earlier I told you guys that I wanted to get paid to be me, and that seemed kind of silly, ridiculous, over the top. And then you wrap this up into a guy who just made all these kind of drastic decisions in his life, and then I realized I still got to eat. How am I going to eat? Call the tattoo friend up. I'm like, I'm working every day, all day long, as much as possible, and I need to make money. because I'm publishing books now. And it's like, that's insane. Who publishes books? Who writes books? How many people in here have written a book? Awesome. 1. What percentage is that? Pretty small. But you made a commitment, and you did it. That's a big deal. Beginning, end. People get to beginning, sometimes sort of beginning, middle. Rarely do they get to the end, especially when that process occurs. In my case, as you can see, that was my second book. The first book we can talk about at some point, but I'll tell you, I would never have come in a church, ever, nor would I have spoken at church, ever. And those who know about it and know my past, which again, we can talk later, but know that there is no way this moment would have ever happened. So it's kind of a big deal for me to even be here personally. But this was my second book. I mean, at that point, I'd written 2 books. I'd toured them. I'd signed autographs for people. I'd taken pictures with people. I held babies. Who hands you a baby for a picture? I don't know. People do it. It's the weirdest thing. But you know what? I got there because I made plans. I said I would do it. I still had that weird drive that I always had. It was very important to me to reach these goals. And oddly, I kept doing it in spite of what everybody told me I could or couldn't do. Funny thing is, it was my school educators that said, it's probably not a great idea, because that's tough. And they were right. It was tough. It's probably not a good idea to tattoo your face and your hands and your neck and your arms and all your legs and everything else. Now I'm going to tell you that that's not the truth. It's a great idea if you're willing to live with the consequences. I am. I do. And I wouldn't be me without it. But for anybody who wants to do it, there's dividends to be paid. So understand that. And for me, now I had to not get a paycheck. I had to create money. When you're like 20 years old and have no idea what that actually means, it's hard. But you learn. And that's exactly what happened. And again, I laid it out. I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to reach that goal. After I'm done writing, I'm going to edit it. After I'm done editing, I'm going to publish this. No publishers wanted a book from a kid who had very negative things to say about the world because he was cynical and mad and hateful because he spent time alone in a room just like you guys do. And you know what's funny? I was like, okay, whatever. I will create a publishing company, and I will publish it myself. And I will put it on every area that will allow it. I will also go to every bookstore that will allow me, and I will sign autographs for the 3 people that just happened to be in that store. Holy cow, you want to talk about a wake-up call. Million seller? No. 3 people, guys, showed up for my first book signing. 3 people. I have more people in here, and that's either A, because you had to be here, which is okay, because, see, they didn't have to be in that bookstore, but you have to be here, so thanks. But really, those 3 people that came up, one said, I don't know who you are, but at least I'll get something signed. Awesome. The other said, a friend told me to pick this up for him. I just need you to sign the inside page. His name's Michael. Awesome. So the first 2 people didn't even care. But you know what? Number 3 had been lurking around the store for a half an hour while I was sitting drinking my tea and staring at my own books because they were nervous to talk to me, because they were intimidated, because they were so excited. Do you know how crazy that is when someone tells you you changed their life? That was the first day I ever heard that. And that's huge, because that day was another turning point for me. I ran from that point on. But what it comes down to is that confidence that I'd gained by publishing books, those dreams that I was starting to achieve, and the self-actualization. Are you guys familiar with what that means? Self-actualization is basically like I said, the beginning and the end. It's the seeing through. And the next slide will explain that a little bit, and I'll talk about it just slightly. But as I was on this path, that person made me decide that I need to continue to plan, but I need something there to guide me. Because they were scared of me, number 1, to tell me how much I meant and what I wrote meant to them. It touched them in some weird way. That's great for me. But then they asked something that I'd never been asked. How did you do it? I don't know. I don't know what I did. I did it. I said I was going to do it. I started to do it. And guess what? I did it. That's a pretty awesome answer for, somebody who's really like pumped to meet you. And then you're like, I don't know. I just kind of like puked it out on some paper and that's what happened. So thanks for reading. Have a good day. That doesn't work. But truth is, I had things. And I'd started to do things. I just never had written them down. Self-actualization. These are the 5 steps I use. This is how I get there every day. And you remember I said something about Facebook earlier, and I said that I post positive things every day? As much, again, as I appreciate people reading it, gotta tell you, it's not about you. I'm gonna tell you firsthand, totally selfish in this, because I still need it. No one's gonna get up in the morning, especially as early as I get up, and say, you look nice today. You're probably going to do awesome all day. Your hair looks really good. And you know what? You're probably going to kick some butt at work. Nobody tells me that. Does anybody tell you guys that? No? Well, somebody's got to. And if that's me on Facebook reminding you, I will. But know that I'm reminding me. I have to do that. And on days that you see those things posted, it's because I'm struggling. I'm trying to get that across to myself because I need it. Choose happiness. Do that every morning. That's my Facebook post. Do this today because you're going to own it all day long. And I believe that, and I try for it every day. Treat people respectfully. Come on, seriously, does that even need to be said? Unfortunately, yes, it does. Absolutely need to be said. Look from the top down and climb from the bottom up. Understand everything affects everything. I've talked a bit about tattoos and getting tattooed and these big floppy earlobes that I have. Everything does affect everything. Life's not random. And you live with decisions forever. Having a drink, getting in a car, 2 of the 3 friends in your car are dead. Whoa. That's something you carry forever. Forever. Have sex, have a child at any age. You got them. They're yours. Welcome to reality. Pay some bills. Make sure they eat. You're probably not going to get any today. But you know what? At that point, you'll get it. You'll cry. I did. I couldn't leave my apartment because of the permanent decisions I made. Crazy to think about. But in all reality, I understood eventually that everything does affect everything. I tattooed my forehead against the specific wishes of my father. I'm going to tell you guys here today not to do it. Please understand there's a difference. But also it was the best decision I ever made for me. Because remember earlier when I said I had to create a paycheck for me? Absolutely true. This doesn't get you jobs at McDonald's or the Buckle or anywhere else you think you can get a job easily. I can put pop cans in my ears, guys. The Buckle doesn't want you to stand there and sell jeans to somebody with pop cans in your ears. That's not what they want. But you know what's great about that? It's what I want. It's what I can do. It's something that assists people in asking questions. Again, I said a lot of people stared at me. A lot of people scoffed at me. A lot of people still do. I go through airports all the time, and I've seen people slam into various walls and pillars because they're staring at me. And you know what's great about that? Everything. Because I can stop and say, "Excuse me, ma'am, are you okay?" And she's all like, "I don't know, I was staring at your ears. I'm crazy. That's crazy stuff." And it's like, it is. If you've never experienced it, it is crazy. But you know what's great about that is now I have that. I have an exchange. I have an interaction. Something's different in my life because I had a chance to be touched by someone else's life. That is huge for me. I cannot shut it off. And those paychecks that I had to create taught me valuable lessons that honestly, I was able to learn in as much as, 6, 7 years. And when I was told that, you can't ever go into the corporate world because it's not easy, because you can't look like you and do that. You don't have the skills because you didn't go to college. It's not true. I do. It's also very true that it is hard. Because every time I work for something, I have to work 3 to 5 times harder. I say to 3 to 5 because it sounds better than 2 to 3, right? Okay, so anyway, when I do these things, when I walk these weird paths, it's to prove something to myself. And ultimately, that proof is that I just have to be it. I have to be whatever it is that I am. And I have to prove that I can do it. And I think that's very important to address. Because you guys, for all the scars that you have, live them. Those are yours. No one else gets those. That hardship that you went through, you know, those times when you ponder things alone, when you cry with your girlfriends at 2 a.m. because you were laughing about something and it triggered a memory. Now you're bawling your eyes out, hugging each other, snots everywhere. You know, that's a big deal. Because that is your moment. That is you. That doesn't define you. That gives you strength for who you will be. Remember earlier I said it's not where you're from, it's what you become? Those are things. This town, this is my hometown. It's a big deal. I can't say that. I've been all over the world, and I can't say that about any other place. This is it. As much as I sometimes hate being here, sometimes I see people and it triggers a memory. That's my memory. Now I shake their hand, I talk to them, because I'm not who I was then. They're not who they were then. Things are different. Now, I just be it. This is what I am today. I hope you guys like it, because that's all you get. I'm willing to learn, teach me things, tell me things. Let's talk. Let's do something. Let's make it different. But understand, this is what you get. All my scars, all this stuff you see, everything I'm into, everything I'm bad at, everything I'm good at, this is it. This is me. This is you guys. Funny thing, 30 years old, did all this stuff, traveled around the world, did these crazy things I said I'd do. Still something missing. It's insane. And what's crazy about it is I thought I knew what peace was. No idea. Didn't get it. Never understood it. This noggin doesn't stop. Never stops thinking, never shuts off. 3 a.m., laying in bed, staring at my cat who's asleep on my chest, his one eye staring at me. Like, seriously, it doesn't shut off. And I thought I knew what peace meant. And to be honest, I had a hard time with things like faith. Even the image that you see there, the photo taken, that was 2009. I have no idea why I took that photo other than it was pretty awesome. I mean, it's local. All those trees are gone. That can't be recreated at this point. But something spoke to me that day. And all along this, I learned something about myself, ultimately. There are things that I lacked. There are things I thought I was great at, but there are things that I lacked. There's a big hole. And I knew what faith was. I knew what it meant. But I'll be honest. Excuse me. I'll be honest with you. As much as I knew what it meant, I hated the thought of it. It scared me to death. I mean, churches, they're big structures. They're oppressive structures sometimes. If you've ever been to like New York or Chicago to see these massive pieces of architecture, of artwork, they're scary when you don't get it. Remember I told you, people in the grocery stores, look at that guy. I'll bet he's a horrible person. Probably kicks kitties. You know, I don't. I love them, obviously. We covered that. But you know what's crazy about it is I say that. I was so mad at people for that. Heck, sometimes I still get mad at people for that. Who can blame them? I did it. I was doing it. I was standing outside these churches. I was walking in them. I had no idea what to do other than stand there and be like, wow, this is huge. This is crazy. I should probably take my hat off. I'm probably being rude. Those are things that I thought about. But you know, I didn't get it. I didn't get what that meant when I was in these places. And I didn't get what family meant. Thought I did. I've been married. I failed a marriage. Like I said, I told you I failed a lot of things. Marriage, relationships with family. I was good at failure. I probably have a closer family now with not only my family, but with people that aren't my family. Because everybody in this room, we're here. If you need something, ask each other, me, everybody else in this room, because the reality of the situation is we're nothing without each other. And the funny thing is, I never understood that. Can I have the next slide, please? And this is what hit me one day. 30-some-odd years old. I'm in an empty house that I'd bought, hoping maybe someday for a family, but wasn't sure. Never really knew what I needed. And then I did the one thing I said I would never do. I remember being in the shower as a kid and thinking, maybe since I wasn't allowed to eat the entire lemon meringue pie that I got for my birthday, I can ask God, and he's going to allow me to get that piece of lemon pie that my dad said I can't have. I'm in the shower, right? I'm young. I don't know how old I was. And I'm thinking this, but do you know what my thought was? No, I'm not doing that. I am way too strong for that. And I mentioned another book earlier. That entire book was filled with hate. It's horrible. It's heavy. It's real. It's how I felt. Some of it spoke out against God, things that this church represents. And you know, here I am in this house that I bought, laying there looking at the ceiling thinking, kind of back to where I was that day when I said, I can just end it all. Got my note written. There's nowhere else for me to go. I guess I'll take a risk. I'll make a choice. And what is that going to be? Well, God, I suppose I'll ask you, if you are something, if you are in anything, if Jesus as a man was someone that I need to follow as the Son of God, what is that? Tell me something. And I lay there. And I'm like, yep, exactly what I figured. And you know the weirdest thing? A few minutes later, I couldn't think of anything. I literally could not think of anything. Nothing. Zero was up here. It was peace. For the first time in my life, I had peace. For the first time in my life, I had to ask for it. I had to not be strong. I had to let it go. I had to ask for it to be placed upon me. I had to be ready for it. And I'm not going to lie to you guys. Dorothy can tell you. We talked about it over the summer. I still struggle with things, and I do. But you know, all these paths that I traveled, I realized I was bearing a lot of fruit. Some of it bad fruit, horrible, rotten fruit that I was bearing. But I was also bearing some good fruit. And the funny thing is, that was the moment that I realized that that seed back in 1981 that was planted was finally realizing that he was a tree that could bear good fruit. And oddly enough, I could never find anything that slightly represented it until I saw this. And you know, I won't read the whole thing. You guys can read. You've probably been through it at some point. But you know, it's really kind of funny. Honestly, because it mentions, well, first of all, it mentions wolves in sheep's clothing. And like I said, people tend to be intimidated by me. So I kind of figure that I'm more like a sheep in wolf's clothing, which kind of works for me, oddly enough. But you know, it's crazy because this was the thing that spoke to me, that I always tried to live right. I always tried to do the best things. I always tried to run the straight and narrow. If I didn't, my dad would whoop me because he was a pretty strict guy. But you know what? I learned respect early on. but I forgot a lot of things. I'm still learning a lot of things. But this really made me realize what family meant, what God meant to me, how much I fought it, how much sometimes I still fight it. But you know what? I'm willing to listen, I'm willing to learn, and I'm willing to have faith. And that's the big thing. That faith piece of this puzzle is what I've been lacking the whole time. And that was really important for me to find. And I'll tell you what, some days I get up and I don't care, and I'm mad. And of course, I post some positive thing on Facebook that everybody's happy about later. But you know, at the end of the day, I remember that God had an effect on me because I asked for it. And still for me to say out loud, that's hard, because I said I never would. I swore I never would. But it is a great piece of my life that I'm still learning to adjust to deal with, to enjoy, to learn more about. And you know, I'm never going to stop learning it. I don't know how to stop learning it. It is now there. It is now something I think about. I have a beautiful wife that, oddly, a decade ago was like, look, get over yourself. God's pretty good, man. Seriously, like, it's good. And you know, at the end of the day, I'm like, yeah, shut it. I don't want to hear it. Funny thing is, a decade later, who am I now married to? This woman that's telling me that. Why is she back in my life? Why is the first thing we ever did was go to church? Because finally, I'd accepted things in my life I needed to accept to gain a family, to understand what that meant, to have peace, and for the first time to have real, true happiness. Anyway, guys, seriously, that's my story. That's it. That's what I got for you. But I hope I wasn't too long, too boring. We got 5, 6, 7-ish minutes, depending on how far we can push it. But seriously, open book. Ask questions, get your hands up, because you got me now. I'll be back if you want me. But seriously, ask, because you never know what happens when we leave these doors. It's an opportunity, take it, because I was always too afraid to ask. So by all means, please, whatever you want. What do you got? What's my cat's name? Well, that photo was actually Photoshopped that you saw, because I would never wear a sweater like that. But in all seriousness, I have 2 cats inside, and one of them is Willie because he's missing an eye, so you know the whole Goonies reference, if for older folks may get it. And then I have another kitty named Bliss, so I'm a cat lover. I'm kind of a nerd that way. So, Dorothy?
Josh, you took a picture of the angel at the end of that lane.
Mm-hmm.
Is that when God talked to you? Is that when you had your first inclination in your mind that Jesus wanted to talk to you?
No, not even close. There was this pull my whole life. I remember being a kid and crawling under my parents' bed because, you know, you're not supposed to be under there. And I'd find this huge Bible, this huge white-covered Bible with all this gold stuff on the cover. And if anybody knows me, I love antique stuff. I love big books. And that spoke to me. And I remember seeing the images and stuff and not getting it yet, not understanding even what it was. But I loved it. I loved how over the top it was. And that was a big deal, but it didn't process here yet. And the funny thing is, I was probably, 14. A gentleman passed away in a car accident that I had only sort of known. And I went to his funeral, and I remember sitting in the church thinking that it was pretty unbelievable being there. And in spite of everything, everybody seemed to be very focused, very on, very with it. And I thought that was really unbelievable. There's a certain sense of peace there. And for me, of course, I'm looking around like, what is this? I've never felt this. I don't get it. But people there had it. So, I mean, those are just 2 examples. There's in the shower that day, you know, it's hitting me on the head. For a piece of pie? Well, yeah, apparently, but you know, it happened often. And And I have a lot of other pictures at the Kent Chapel. When it was a mess, I was out there. Tons of pictures of that place a mess. Why? Because it's unbelievable, and there's reasons to go in there. I just didn't know what they were then. Yes? Yes, every single thing that I have tattooed on. If you didn't hear, she asked about my tattoos and what they mean. Every single thing on me means something. And it's really pretty intense, a lot of it. I mean, at the very beginning, you guys saw a picture of my hand on what is my grandmother's headstone. It says hope on my fingers for anybody up front. And actually, on this hand, it says lost. Kind of funny when you put those together, right? Oddly, that wasn't my intention. This is all of my childhood on my right arm. This is all of family-related stuff. And family gave me hope, gave me something. When I was a kid, I was lost. So, I mean, everything means something. I mean, I have stuff everywhere. So, yeah, it all means something to varying degrees. And if you want to pick me apart at some point when we have more time, by all means, feel free. But, yeah, you can see it in that photo and right here. But, yeah, they all mean something, absolutely. And, I mean, like, I have some Asian stuff on my hands. I have the stuff on my forehead. I mean, I got a copyright symbol because I'm a writer. So, yeah, I have a lot of stuff. And I'm kind of one of a kind, so just so you guys know. There's only one of me, can't duplicate, et cetera, et cetera. But, yeah, so that's the long and short of that. Questions? Anybody else? Yeah? Sure. They are, they're called subdermal implants, and what they are is, and what they represent actually is full circle, because if you notice, everything works in a big circle. It's all connected. And when that seed was planted for me, here I am, 30-some years later, coming full circle, realizing what the deal is. And, I mean, these are what feed me. This feeds my family. I mean, my hands do that. And what they are is they're actually silicone, so they're totally squishy. If anybody wants to feel them on the way out the door, totally feel free. It blows people's minds at the airports. It's pretty funny. But, or you can put milk in it for kittens to drink out of and stuff. But, you know, everybody thinks I'm super tough, but yeah, that's truly more like how it is. So, anybody else? Yeah? My first tattoo was a set of comedy and tragedy masks on my shoulder, which represent theater, overacting, over-talking, which is why I'm probably up here talking and over-animating myself. But, yeah, and also it represented some of my favorite musicians at the time also. So it was kind of really my way of I guess, connecting with that piece of me, and the fact that I'm totally not musical at all. So, you know. Anybody else? Yeah? Solid black. You know, it's funny. Actually, I used to have a version of this on this pinky, which is now gone. But the solid black stuff for me was really important because it relates to indigenous cultures. If you guys aren't familiar with what indigenous means, it basically means cultures with a foundation that is much more, much less developed than ours. I mean, people that live in huts in places still do scarification and things like that to look like alligators. To us, that seems completely bizarre, but you know what? They do it. And what that represents, what the black actually represents, is a way to honor those who have come before you and passed on, is what the black is. It's kind of the equivalent to like a black armband you see on basketball players if another player or coach has passed away. Things like that is what it represents. Yeah. I stretch my ears, especially to this level, because number one, obviously I take things about as far as anybody can take anything ever. And also, back to the indigenous cultures, I traveled to Japan, I don't know, years ago, and it was really important for me to see the Buddha in Kamakura. And the reason for that was because for those of you who are stretching or have no idea what it means and are sticking ink pens in your face, what it really means, and people do that, by the way, what it actually represents is patience and wisdom. And the reason you generally start small and grow up is because it takes time, a lot of time. It took me about a decade, 10 years to do this, a little over. And I'll tell you, I gained a lot in that time frame as far as the wisdom of doing it, what your body can take, what it can't take. And obviously, we discussed a lot of other things in between there. And a lot of people can't stick with it. It's that beginning and that end thing, and I wanted to see it through. This should be a doozy, guys. It's my sister. What's up?
I don't really have a question, but I just don't know if the rest of the people know. So
This could be good.
I'm going to ask you this question. Looking the way you look and making those choices at a young age, in high school and stuff, you look like you probably were a wild child. But did you drink, smoke, anything?
Yeah, I can talk to that a little bit. The answer is actually no. I did not drink. I did not smoke. I do currently. I was 27 years old before I had a drink ever. And to be honest, it's not because I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to get hammered. This is going to be awesome. Had nothing to do with that at all. Zero. I never filmed myself and stuck myself on Facebook or YouTube. Didn't do any of that stuff. What I did was I grew up in a household where alcohol was very hidden. It was dark. It was a hard thing. It still is a hard thing. That's not something you just leave. And I, again, mentioned earlier that I take things always a little too far, and I was afraid that I would take that a lot too far. And I know what roads those lead. I've seen it. I've had friends die because of it. And do you know how great that is? It's not great. It's horrible. And I knew, not thought, not considered being, knew that that's what I would be. Funny thing is, when I was 27 years old, I'm like, you know what? I can beat this. I'm not those people. And honestly, the first drink that I ever had was the hardest thing for me because I was essentially giving up every ethic that I ever had. As hard as it is to stand up here now and say that God's in my life, it is that hard. And the reason it really was because I had to prove to myself I was not those people. I am not going to let that run my life. It didn't, doesn't, won't ever, never ever. Did I go through a small period after that where it started to? Yep, I did, just like I thought I would. But I told myself, nope, squash, done, and I did. And you know what? Everybody thought I was, some crazy thief, rapist, robber, criminal, because of the way I looked, because you never saw tattoos on people in towns this size ever. I know this because people would ask me those things. Like, what criminal's going to be like, I'm totally a criminal. I robbed that place down the street last week. Who's going to do that? But they would ask me. So the long and short of it is I was kind of a nerd who kept to himself and totally looked kind of funny. What's up? Was I bullied? You know, it's funny. I was not. And if you are, by the way, you're worth it. Like, seriously? That's it. That's all that needs to be said. You are worth it. And why? Because they are doing something you didn't even do for them. They are taking time for you. They're giving you power. They're handing it to you. They're like, look, I don't have anything better to do, so I'm choosing you to pick on, to be a pain in your butt. Own that. Tell them thanks. What are they going to do? They're going to be like, excuse me? Like, you want me to push you around again? Like, oh, thanks for taking the time out of your day. I mean, you're taking your own life away from yourself by spending it harassing me. Thanks. I mean, that's unbelievable that people do that. Thanks. That's all you got to say. Then grab 5 of your friends. They like to spend time with me too. You want to spend more time with us? Feel free. Jump in on this. I mean, seriously. They're taking time for you. Don't waste your hate on them. Don't. Because they're not wasting theirs on you. They have something to talk about. Ask them. What's up?
Hearing how you're so alone and everything, do you have any advice on if the kids feel that way, like how they could reach out to an adult, or do you have any advice for the adults on something that they could have said to you to make you
Sure.
better about yourself?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mentioned earlier that it was hard for me because I was told when I was young that I could be anything. And then all the way through school, people are like, not a good idea, Josh. I don't know if you want to do that. That's probably not the best idea. Again, I'm not going to say that they weren't right in saying so, but that drove me to do it. The thing is, though, to your point, I still felt alone in it. I didn't have support. I didn't have anything that I felt like I needed. My advice for parents, for people, for adults, not even with kids, but with each other. Seriously. I mean, catch me anywhere. Anyone who's in this room probably knows that you can message me on Facebook, you can call my phone, and I'm going to take time for you. That's the issue. Period. Time. Hand it to somebody. When you're getting your loaf of bread outside the store and your kids are screaming at you because they want to go home and eat, but somebody stops you and says, hey, do you have a minute? The answer is yes. The answer is always yes. That's it. Always. Because they need a minute. Give it to them. It's worth your time. Follow up later. Do whatever you have to do. Receive what they have to offer and help. Be honest. I laid it out there. Seriously? Skeletons in my closet? Come over. Drag them out. There ain't any. You saw them all. Seriously. If you don't have those, no one has leverage. Don't let them have it. Ask. Ask people. Ask each other. The best way to approach them, earlier, when I told you guys to put your hands up, put them up. If you feel it, put them up. I don't mean that literally, but I mean that seriously. If somebody's struggling, you don't know them, like, hey, good morning. See, you're having a rough day. If you got 5 minutes, want to talk about it, let me know. And they'll probably look at you like, seriously? I've never talked to you in my life. But you know what? They'll probably call. Because everybody needs somebody. Don't forget that. I'm going to go right back here. What's up, Danny?
Basically, it's more of a comment.
Okay.
I suffer with a lot of stuff. You know, we're good friends. We talk about it a lot. I also suffer from agoraphobia and those sorts of things. Being a friend of somebody, accept that. Talk to your friends. And being a friend, if you have somebody that, you know, is having a problem and tries to be open to you about it, accept it. Don't, you know, just be like, oh, whatever, you'll be fine. Sit there, just give them 5 minutes and listen to what they have to say. It may mean more than you'll ever imagine to that person.
I will second that. And also, I know we're totally like at time. I know parents may be here, people picking up people, whatever we got to do. I know we also need to take a minute to say a quick prayer before people get out of here. We can do this however you guys want. I'll stand here as long as you guys need me to, or want me to, or ask me to. And you guys can sit as long as you guys want. But I don't want to hold anybody over. I don't want to get anybody in trouble. I don't want to cause any issues.
That's what I was just going to say. Josh would be glad to answer any questions. Come up to him. Again, he's on Facebook and
Everywhere.
all that stuff
Find
I
me.
don't know about. So make sure you contact him. He would be glad to talk to you. I do have a question.
Certainly.
You take everything to the extreme.
Yep,
Always have.
for sure.
And to be honest, this is probably an extreme for you, being a
It is.
disciple.
Sure.
What's your step in your faith? I know everybody's at a different place. These kids are at a different place in their journey in faith. You take it to extreme.
Sure.
What do you see in the future? Not only as a role model for other kids and for your own family, but I'm pretty sure you didn't see yourself ever doing this.
You know, it's really funny, but that's actually not true. It's not true in that I never saw myself doing this. It's funny, but and the weird thing about dreams and crazy visions is that you always remember funny things about them. And oddly, there was always a woman standing to my left in white pants. I don't know why. That's what I remember. But seriously, I always saw myself doing this in a church, in various churches. I have no idea why. People have told me it's what I should do. To be honest, thanks to Dorothy, this is my first chance at it. I don't know if I did great, if I failed. I know I have a lot to learn. I know that where this ended will roughly be the middle of where I end up. So where I see myself is at the beginning and still traveling this road and doing more of this because, to be honest, regardless of how many people here want to raise their hand, I know that you have dealt with the same things I dealt with, which is why I'm willing to stand here. I get it. I know what it's like to feel completely unloved, totally hated, misplaced. I work in corporate America, guys. When was the last time you saw a guy with a tie on that looked like me? Serious. I'm still out of the ordinary. I'm still misplaced. And I love it. Learn to love it. Seriously. So I see that. There you go.
Let's thank you very much.
Absolutely.
Let's give him